All right, hello again, PodB students. Here I am again to talk to you about your fourth market structure, monopolistic competition. So with monopolistic competition, this is going to be the one that you are the most familiar with. We encounter this the most often in our daily lives. This is the market structure that's pretty much everywhere. Monopolistic competition is when there is a large number of producers providing goods that are similar, but there's variation. So anytime you're eating in a restaurant, you're buying gas at a gas station, you're going shopping, you are doing business in monopolistically competitive markets. So again, it's going to be, we'll talk about several different examples, but these are going to be the ones that we're really familiar with. If you take a look at your spectrum, we've talked about the other three. So we've talked about perfect competition. Remember, this is the most competitive. We've talked about the very far end of the spectrum. The opposite of perfect competition would be a monopoly. So that's your one firm with a unique product, really controlling the market. So very little competition. We talked about oligopolies, where again, they're still less competitive, but you're talking about like your few big firms that are controlling industries like soda, breakfast cereal. And now we've got monopolistic competition. So we've got many producers, we have differentiation amongst our products, and there are very few barriers to entry. So it's relatively easy to become a producer in this type of market and some control over prices. So again, if we kind of look at our four characteristics, you've got all kinds of different producers or sellers. The bigger the city, the more competition you have. Think about certain communities, suburban areas or urban areas where there is a restaurant or a coffee shop on every corner, and they are competing with one another for business. Gas stations, hotels, shopping malls, all the clothing stores within a shopping mall, all monopolistic competition. Salons. Again, you go to certain neighborhoods and there are 5 or 6 different salons, all within a few blocks of each other. Monopolistic competition. Lots of producers, differentiated products, okay? Whether it's a barbershop or a salon or a spa, they're offering services, grooming services, if you will, or beauty services. But each one's going to offer something a little bit different. Prices are going to vary. The type of service that you get is going to vary at those different locations, just like restaurants or fast food. Okay, so fast food's going to provide a different experience than a sit-down restaurant, but again, similar products. Very few barriers to entry. Again, we wouldn't have so much competition if it was difficult to become a producer or a seller in this market. So very few barriers to entry. Startup costs are relatively low in monopolistically competitive markets, and that's what allows many firms to enter the market and be able to earn a profit. And then there's some element of control over prices. Because there's so much competition, depending on the category of those products, they might need to be relatively the same. But because producers control their brands, it's going to give them some control over prices. And we'll talk about some of that non-price competition in a couple of minutes. Because products from different producers have close substitutes, that's why this is some control over prices, because they really don't have all the market power. It is somewhat limited because there's going to be a lot of close substitutes for a variety of different products. If the prices go too high, consumers might shift to another brand. Plus, if there's too many producers for price leadership or collusion to happen, it's going to, again, limit that market power and that ability to have control over prices. So because there are so many producers, there's so much competition in this type of market structure. In order to compete with rival firms, producers in monopolistically competitive markets have to take price into consideration. But they also engage in something called non-price competition. So non-price competition is when they're going to differentiate their products and use advertising to try to set their products apart from their competitors. So there's 4 different factors that we look at when we're talking about non-price competition. So the first would be physical characteristics. There are many kinds of products that consumers are going to pay more for because they are unique in a physical way. So for example, shoes. Shoes are a great example of monopolistic competition. There's great differentiation of the products. However, it might be you might kind of have brand loyalty with a brand that really sets itself apart with those physical characteristics. A pair of running shoes might stand out from its competitors because it's really unique, or the color, or the materials, or maybe there is a celebrity athlete that's endorsing that particular product. That is an example of non-price competition. The consumer who likes that particular shoe might not even consider buying another pair regardless of price. So it's competition away from the price, non-price competition. A second factor would be service. Some producers are going to offer better service than others and can therefore charge higher prices. For example, fast food and sit-down restaurants. We kind of mentioned this example before. I'm going to get a different service experience in most fast food restaurants than I might in a sit-down restaurant. Grocery stores are the same. Sometimes you have smaller, more upscale grocery stores. They're going to offer different experiences for their customers, or maybe it's food delivery, maybe it's catering, maybe it's more samples. Department stores are also the same. Maybe there's some level of personal shopping or an elevated shopping experience that's going to appeal to the consumer, and they're willing to pay more for it because of the service. So it's, again, non-price competition. Location's another factor. A lot of times, and this is probably the most common non-price competition, is your location's going to matter. If it's easy to get in and out of your coffee shop versus the coffee shop that's on a busy intersection, you're probably going to get more business, and maybe you can charge more for your products. People are willing to pay the higher price because of the convenience of the location. And then the final one is status and image. Sometimes companies compete based on their perceived status, their trendiness, their image, what they perceive consumers to want based on status. What's trendy, what's fashionable, maybe it's more exclusive, maybe it's organic, it's natural, it's handmade, or it's local. Local made products are kind of having a resurgence right now where everybody's trying to buy local. You are willing to pay more for that product because of that status or the image that is attached to that. So you might be willing to pay more for designer jeans or a designer label on a handbag, or again, those locally made products because of that. So those perceived status differences, again, are going to come from advertising. A lot of these things that we're mentioning right here, this non-price competition piece, is going to come from advertising. Those advertisers are going to give them information about the product, but the main goal is to increase sales and market share. So again, if we go back and we revisit or review our different characteristics. Oh, I cannot talk today. Sorry about that, guys. Our 4 characteristics. We're looking at how many producers in this particular market structure. We've got lots of producers. We have differentiated products, so they're similar, but they're different. You've got very few barriers to entry, so easy to be an entrepreneur or a new producer or seller in this market. And you've got some control over prices. And the way that you get that control is typically going to be through non-price competition. So by now, I hope that you've got a pretty good understanding of all 4 market structures. Remember, for any type of assessment that might be coming up, you need to be able to describe and explain the 4 characteristics of each of these market structures: perfect competition, monopolistic, oligopolies, and monopolies. You should be able to place them on this spectrum, and you should be able to tell us the 4 characteristics of each of those market structures. So feel free to review any of these screencasts or refer to Chapter 7 in your book to get a better understanding or a little bit more detail about market structures. Thank you. Talk to you next time.